Hey, everybody, welcome. For those of you who are new, I'm the good Lori Hellis, retired criminal defense attorney for 27 years, and now writing a book about the Lori Vallow Chad Daybell case, and doing lots of chatting on social media about true crime in general. I'm going to give us just a few minutes for the chat to catch up and for folks to log on. And while I'm doing that, let's talk about the True Crime Quilt Guild, which was a quilt along that we were doing with everybody who was involved in quilting. And I finished mine and sent it off to the very generous Terry Goyens, who is going to quilt it for me. And in the meantime, I have an idea for a little something. I haven't pulled it all together yet, but it would be something special for Kay and Larry. So stick with me, because it would be that would be a project where each of us would create a square, and then we would put it all together. So I've got a pattern in mind, and I would like to confirm with the designer that it would be all right to use it. So because we don't use other people's work unless we have their approval, whether it's their content online or whether it is their pattern that they have designed. So we don't do that. However, now that we're starting to catch up with people, I have a couple of things that I would really like to talk about tonight. First of all, today is exactly 3 weeks since I had a total hip replacement on my right hip, and I'm doing really well. My physical therapist is super complimentary, but I had physical therapy this morning, and I'm a little wiped out this evening. So stick with me. I may not be as on the ball as I always am. And there may be a few more ums and ahs than normal. I'll do my best. I do want to talk about something that I am very, very disturbed about. Two things, in fact. You know, I love our community, and I am immensely proud of the level, the height of our chats, sociability, sensibility, sense of community, level of compassion. All of those things mean a tremendous amount to me. I'm very and so I am choosing, and I think with good reason, to believe that I'm going to be preaching to the choir with the next couple of things I want to talk about. I am choosing to believe that there is no one involved in my chat, our chat, that could possibly be involved in these next two things. But I really would like for you all, because you all are active in the community, to spread the word and to let people know that this kind of behavior is not okay. Not okay now, not okay ever. The first thing is, I told you last week that Adam Cox and Rex Cox, who are Lori Vallow Daybell's brother, Adam, and her uncle, Rex. Adam has been interviewed several times on several different platforms about Lori and the case. Rex was interviewed. He attended Lori's trial and was interviewed on a couple of occasions. And both of them have been very grounded, gracious people. They have started a YouTube channel in preparation for writing a book together about their family and about their experiences with Lori. Um, they both said that they thought that it was a very important thing for them to do because they felt like it was important to the healing of their families. They also very early on said that if there were any income to be generated by either a book or their YouTube channel, that they would be donating that to the Center for Exploited and Missing and Exploited Children. And I've said from the beginning, I think that that is important to keep in mind. So we added in our show notes a link to those YouTube channel, to that YouTube channel, and to their shows. They've put out 4 so far, and they have taken a tremendous amount of heat. Too many trolls complaining that either Adam let Charles Vallow down and abandon him, or that they are simply doing this for the money. I don't think either one of those things is true. I think that as we go along, we will hear from Adam about how things happened as Charles was trying to get help for Lori. And I think we're going to hear more about that. So I am choosing to believe that no one in our group would have been participating in either one of those kinds of comments, that we're going to give them support and grace. They are every bit as deserving of our support and our grace as are Larry and Kay, and as are Chad Daybell's children. And I've said all along, we are not going to go after families, not any way, not any shape, not any form. Families are off limits. So we are going to be supportive and graceful, and we're going to keep those kind of suspicious, bitter comments to ourselves. And more importantly, we're going to call out those people that we see in our true crime community who are making the rest of us look bad, because it's not a good look for any of us. The next thing I want to talk about is about our true crime creator community. And this person, now she's got 90,000 followers. So I have to assume that there are some of you who have at least subscribed at some point to her channel. This person has a Patreon account where she posts things behind a paywall. And this last week, she posted the graphic autopsy photos of Gannon Strout, of 8-year-old Gannon Strout. Now, the Strout case is one that you may or may not have been involved in following, but I want you to think about what that would feel like if that was JJ's autopsy photos. Really, we're talking about a child about the same age. This is behavior that is beyond reprehensible. This is behavior that is so far from what we're about. And it is incredibly offensive for this person to post up how they're all about the victims and all about victim support and all about justice for the victims, and then to do that to the Stout family. I cannot imagine what the Stout family is going through right now. So I am going to just say, I believe that my community, that our community that follows this channel would never be involved in something like that. I sincerely hope that you will continue to share the word about this creator, that you will pass the word along to other people in other groups and let them know, because she covers a variety of cases in true crime. I hope that if you have subscribed to this person in the past, that you will promptly unsubscribe to her channel and that we can vote with our feet about what is appropriate and what is not appropriate in our community. Because this is our community, and if we don't police it, nobody else is going to. So we can't rely on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or any of those platforms to police this community. There are many, many people who feel that the true crime community are simply somehow vultures, that we're all just circling around for all of the, I don't know, for all of the titillating details. I don't feel that's true at all. I feel like we're here to learn something. We're here to make sense out of things that don't always make sense. And we're here to support one another and support the families. And I'm telling you right now, I don't need those kind of likes, and I don't need those kind of subscribers. So if any of you at all find what I have just said objectionable or offensive, I would invite you to promptly unsubscribe from my channel. We are about the positive, we are about the uplifting, and we are about giving grace to everyone. So I have said my piece. Please, please pass the word, because this is our community and we need to be responsible for it. And that means the good and the bad. So I am more than willing to have any one of you call me out and invite you to call me out when I get it wrong, when I say it wrong, when I have too many ums and ahs, when I get the facts wrong, when I say something that probably should have been left unsaid. I always invite you to call me out, because I believe that when you do that, I get better. And I believe that it is time for our community to start cleaning itself up. So enough said about that. I want to talk tonight. There are quite a few things going on in the Kohberger case. So I want to talk about that. I want to give you all a heads up that we might be ending a little bit early tonight, because I'm a little tired and have a couple of family things going on that I need to tend to. Nothing of any crisis in my life, but a couple things that I need to help my family tend to. Debbie Biggs, I agree. Absolutely. It is so disheartening and so despicable that this person put them up to begin with, and really despicable that anyone would be paying dues to Patreon to be able to see it. So now that I've gotten that off my chest, let's talk about Kohberger. There's been a lot of stuff going on in the Kohberger case. It's a lot of legal positioning and wrangling, and so I want to sort of bring some clarity to that. One of the issues that has continued to be an issue is the issue of discovery. Now, we saw this in the Vallow-Daybell case. We saw at the end that the court ended up dismissing the death penalty as to Lori Vallow-Daybell, because the prosecution did not properly tend to making sure that the defense had all the discovery they were entitled to. So I don't know if some of this is the defense sort of getting out ahead of that possibility. But let's remember that there is still a trial set for October, and they're coming clear a few reasons why they might want to keep that October trial date. So we'll get there in a minute. One of the issues that they have asked for is in the discovery has been that they want the genetic genealogy information. Now, we've talked about this before, and I want to tell you, it's never been super clear to me, because I'm not a science and statistics kind of person, until I saw yesterday's episode of Harvard lawyer Lee. She had an expert on whose name is Cece, and she is a researcher in genetic genealogy and has been involved in a lot of high profile cases. And she walked through it step by step, and it made a tremendous amount more sense to me as a lay person. So I have put the link to that episode in my show notes, because if you want a complete, really thorough explanation at a lay person's level of how genetic genealogy works, that will be the place to get it. Lee did a great job. Cece is super interesting, and I think you will all find it helpful. But one of the things that the defense has been saying is, we don't just want to know if there was a match. We want to know, we want you to show your work. We want you to know, we want to see how the long division played out. So they have been continuing to try and get that information, and the prosecution has been resistant. And there is a decent reason for why they have been resisting. I don't want to get too deeply into it, because they get into it deeply on Harvard lawyer Lee's broadcast with Cece. But essentially, there are the major genealogy data banks, Ancestry and 23andMe. Both have contractual obligations with the people who give them their DNA, not to release that DNA to law enforcement. However, the individual can release that raw DNA data to the database that is available for genetic genealogy, and that is called Gen something. And so giving out that raw data at that kind of granular level and showing your work of how they build the family trees, where they finally get to the connection with the DNA depositor, could have a chilling effect on people being willing to allow their DNA to be uploaded to their. I need to answer a quick text message, to be uploaded to those sites. So they're concerned about giving out that raw data. The other interesting thing that came out of the, so to continue, the prosecution is asking the court for a protective order so that they don't have to release that show your work family tree granular sort of data. And the defense answered that request for a protective order by giving us some information that we had not had before. One of them is that there is a total lack of DNA of the victims. There's a complete lack of any of the victims' DNA in Kohberger's home, office, and car. So now we know that he had a substantial period of time after the murders were committed to go back and clean up. We know there were days and days and days. He had time to clean his car. He had time to clean his apartment. He had time to clean out his office. He had time to dispose of anything that might have had their DNA on it. But the defense also points out that there were two different depositors of male DNA in the apartment, as well as a glove found outside the apartment that also had a third unknown male's DNA. So now we have three unknown males who may or may not be related to the case. And as far as we know, genetic genealogy has not been accomplished on any of those samples. So I don't want to get too far into the weeds on this, because if you want a really good explanation, definitely take a look at Lee's podcast from last night. But I thought it was interesting to point out that circumstantial evidence depends on there not being another rational explanation for the evidence. So it gets more convoluted and more difficult when there are other explanations for evidence. So, yes, we know that touch DNA belonging to Brian Koberger was found on the button on that knife sheath. And yes, that is very damning. And that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So the fact that there is no evidence on the scene does not mean Brian Koberger was not there. But it is interesting that also in that discussion was the comment that there has been no known connection between Brian Koberger and the victims. No, and you can only assume that that means that there was nothing on any of his electronic devices that could have connected him to the victims. Again, that doesn't mean that he wasn't stalking them. It doesn't mean that he wasn't involved. It just means that it is more difficult to. We've talked about the fact that circumstantial evidence is like a chain. It's like links in a chain. And it is much more difficult to make those connections, to connect up those links, when there are other explanations for that circumstantial evidence. So that leads me to wonder. So the next thing that happened, before I get there, before what it leads me to, the next thing that happened was Koberger's team had asked for a lengthy stay, and in some case, in some way, indefinite stay, in order for them to be able to challenge the underlying grand jury indictment. Now, he stood silent. That was because they intended to, they wanted to leave open the opportunity, to challenge the indictment. Here's the problem. Grand jury transcripts are long and cumbersome, and they're hard to get written transcripts. It takes time. We saw that in the Vallow Daybell case. We saw that it took months to get those transcripts. So what Koberger's team was arguing was that they needed a stay because they had all of this information they needed to consider. Now, what the judge said was that the statute does not allow them a stay until they have identified, unless they have identified deficiencies in the indictment and in the grand jury process. And of course, they can't know that until they get a grand jury transcript. So after the judge said, come back after you've seen the grand jury transcript and let me know whether or not you feel that there's been some problem with the grand jury process, he also said, but it seems kind of unfair that the clock keeps ticking while for no cause of your own, you can't move your case forward. So he gave them a 37-day stay up until the deadline of when the grand jury transcripts are due. So it did make me wonder, leading back to what I was going to say, it made me wonder whether the defense team might be smart to rush to trial and to go forward with trial in October, even though they have likely not done the mitigation that they need to, even though they have likely not done all of the investigation that they need, because neither has the prosecution. So the prosecution is at this point in the same sort of wrapped around the axle with 3 other DNA depositors that they have not tested. They have not. So they did what is called STS testing, which is essentially the form of testing that is required in order to check law enforcement database, the CODIS database, for DNA matches. But in order for them to then use this genetic genealogy, they have to put that DNA sample into a different form. And once again, Lawyer Lee's got a huge, wonderful explanation of all of that. But essentially, before the genetic genealogist can get a hold of the information, it has to be it has to be put into a certain format, into a certain form, and that is not the form that they compare with CODIS. So that's somewhat time consuming, and it's also somewhat labor intensive. It has to be sent out to a private lab to have it done, which is expensive. And we're dealing with a small county that has limited resources. So it makes you wonder whether the defense might be smart to push the timeline and to really hold the prosecution's feet to the fire. I think this is why you have not seen anything that would lead you to believe that October is not going to be the date. So it will be very interesting to see how that plays out as we go forward. So some folks asked me to talk about Summer Wells. Summer Wells was a 5-year-old that went missing 2 years ago. This is very similar, perhaps similar to, the little guy up in Fruitland, Idaho, whose name I will think of in just a moment. Summer went missing age 5, 2 years ago. Her body's never been found. It's really interesting if you look at the YouTube postings where mom was interviewed, father was interviewed. Her father was arrested on a DUI. He has a long history of alcohol abuse. He was let out, later was arrested on a probation violation. CPS removed this couple's other children after Summer was reported missing. And interestingly enough, the interview with mom is just mind-boggling. She is so out of it and loaded on something. And but the interesting thing is the judge in the case recently awarded a $40,000 reward fund to the 3rd Judicial District Child Advocacy Center. So it appears that both parties were trying in some way to get their hands on that money, and the judge said, no, sorry, you're done. So that was sort of interesting, but there's been no progress on finding Summer. Monkey Vaughn is the little guy's name from Fruitland, Michael Vaughn. And then there's this interesting case of Sarah Boone. Sarah calls up 911 in the morning and says, "Oh my gosh, there's been a horrible accident. Last night, my boyfriend and I were messing around and I zipped him inside a suitcase. But we were both really drunk and I passed out and I woke up this morning and he's dead in the suitcase." So in the beginning, it sounded odd, but maybe plausible. But as law enforcement has continued to look into the case, it's become less and less plausible. For one thing, there is a video on her phone. Now, I have posted a link to that video in my show notes. Trigger warning, it is hard to listen to. She is recording on her phone as the suitcase is moving around on the floor because this man is in the suitcase. And he is talking to her and he is saying, "I can't breathe. I can't breathe." And she is saying, "This is for everything you've ever done to me." He says, "I can't breathe." And she says, "Now you know how I feel. You shouldn't have choked me." And so it's very clear this wasn't it may have been that it was sort of a prank. And then once it was obvious that once he was in the suitcase, she decided that this was as good a time as any to just leave him there. She laughs. As he's saying that he can't breathe. She's been writing letters to the judge and now is on her 6th public defender. You know, it is possible for somebody to have a personality conflict or a disagreement with one lawyer, maybe even two. But if you are about to be the 3rd lawyer on a case, warning, warning, warning. Danger, Will Robinson. Yeah. You don't want to be the 3rd lawyer on anybody's case. If you decide to take a case and you are the 3rd lawyer, you go into it with eyes wide open, knowing that this is likely a problem client. So it will be interesting. There was a pretrial yesterday, I want to say, and a lot of people were wondering whether or not they were going to see her at the pretrial. She keeps writing letters to the judge saying that she wants to be at all her court proceedings, and yet she is not. So that tells me that she has not behaved herself in court. So it will be interesting to see that case is scheduled for trial, but now people are wondering whether it's going to go forward to trial anytime soon. And she is charged with 2nd-degree murder, I believe. Those of you who are court watchers, there have been a couple of trials going on. I'm going to talk about both of them quickly. The first one is Ronald Anthony Burgos Aviles. I did not even attempt to say that with a Spanish accent. He was a Border Patrol agent, a supervisor Border Patrol agent. He was convicted last week of killing his mistress and their baby. He was married, had 2 children. He and his wife had some marital difficulties, had been separated for a while, got back together because of the kids. In the meantime, he was seeing this other woman. She became pregnant. She told him the baby was his. He wanted nothing to do with it. And for the next 18 months, she didn't press the issue. But she was going to school. She was trying to pay daycare out of her student loans and her grants. And she ran out of money and went to child support and asked child support to enforce support for the couple's son. He did not want his wife to find out that he had had this affair and had a child with this woman. He did not want to pay child support. And so he invited her to meet him at a park that he regularly patrolled as a Border Patrol agent. And when she got there, he murdered her and the 18-month-old baby. It is a horrendous case. And right now, we're in the penalty phase, in the phase of presenting to the jury whether or not this person should be sentenced to death versus life in prison. It's a Texas case, so Texas has the death penalty and carries it out pretty routinely. So it is really a good example of what a penalty phase looks like and what mitigation looks like. I think his team is doing a pretty good job on the issue of trying to mitigate the death penalty. I don't know that they're going to manage it because the jury has seen the pictures of that 18-month-old baby. So I think that he's got a seriously uphill battle. So the other case that is going on right now is out of Arizona, and that is Michael Turney. Now, we talked about Michael Turney's case because his daughter, Sarah, has been on YouTube and has been on TikTok, a lot on TikTok, attempting to get this case reopened. Her sister disappeared in 2001, so more than 20 years ago. And her father, who was the older sister's stepfather who adopted her, is accused of having murdered her. No body's ever been found. It's going to be very interesting to see what, after 20 years, the prosecution, what kind of a case the prosecution is able to put on after 20 years. It's going on now. I think it's on day 4, and Law and Crime is carrying that one. And there's 2 other cases I want to talk about, and they are a little bit off of the beaten path, a little bit off of what we usually, sorry, I got to shift my hip here. A little bit off of what we often talk about, but cases that have some important and valid things to discuss. The first one is Alexi Treviso. So Alexi was 19. She was a senior in high school, appeared from all appearances to be a fairly immature 19-year-old. She was on the cheer squad at her high school. And her mother took her to the hospital because she was complaining that she was having severe back pain. She was complaining about terrible pain. They took her to the ER. They ran a bunch of tests, including a pregnancy test, and it was positive that she was pregnant. And the pain was that she was in labor. It's unclear at this point, but at some point during the workup in the ER, she was given a dose of morphine for the pain. Now, it's not clear at this point whether the pregnancy test results had come back or not. Her attorney claims that they had been in the computer for about 35 minutes at the time that they administered the morphine, and that is going to become important in a minute. So Lexi suddenly says, I have to go to the bathroom. For any of you ladies who have given birth, you know that that is often a symptom of late labor. She says, I need to go to the bathroom. She rushes down the hall. The security camera video catches her going down the hall, holding her hand behind her bottom and rushing into the bathroom. She's in there for 10 or 15 minutes. And people knock on the door, ask if she's okay. She keeps saying she's okay. She's just having trouble going to the bathroom. Then finally the charge nurse gets the key and he's going to open the door. And about that time, she opens the door from the other side and comes out, walks back to her ER bed. When the charge nurse goes in, he realizes that there's blood everywhere. And he's very concerned because in that period of time, they have gotten the pregnancy test results back and know that she is pregnant. And he is very concerned that she's tried to hurt herself while she was in the bathroom. So, because she's been told that the pregnancy test was positive. It is a little bit unclear when all those things happen, when she's told, when it's in the hospital computer, and all of those things are going to be issues for trial, obviously. She comes back to the ER and she is, as she is leaving the bathroom, she leaves bloody footprints. She clearly is bleeding heavily. And so the ER staff are trying to figure this out. She's bleeding. In the meantime, they call the cleaning crew to come in and clean up the bathroom. And when the cleaning crew comes in, the woman goes to pull the garbage, trash bag out of the garbage, and the bag is heavy. And even though from the top, it looks like an empty garbage bag. And when she pulls the bag up, she can see through it, and there's a baby in there. So she immediately calls the charge nurse. They rush in. The baby is dead, is beyond being resuscitated. So they go into her room, and this is all on video. There's body cam video. There's video from within the ER room where she is, and there's video in the hallway. So you get a pretty good sense of what's going on. Alexi is there with her mother, who appears to be a pretty controlling and pretty helicopter-y mom. So the nurse comes in and she says, "We found a baby in the garbage and we have to call the police." Alexi says, nothing was crying. I didn't know what to do. I was panicked. We didn't move. It didn't cry, and I didn't know what to do, and I threw it in the garbage. It's a little bit more intentional than that, because she took the bag and twisted it and then wrapped it under the bag and then put other stuff in on top to hide it, put another garbage bag in so that it was disguised. So the autopsy recently came back on the baby. So the next thing that happens is the hospital is very concerned because she's still hemorrhaging. And so they fly her to a hospital that has a OB ward. And they receive her there and treat her for her postpartum issues. She's released from the hospital and goes home. And sometime later, the police come to her home and arrest her. So she's arrested, and then her family posts bond, and she is out on an ankle monitor and on $100,000 bond, I believe. So there are many, many questions about this. So the defense says she was given morphine. She shouldn't have been given morphine because she was pregnant. And the hospital was negligent in administering morphine without first checking the pregnancy results, and that morphine depresses the respiration so that it is likely that the baby died upon birth. I did see an interview with a forensic pathologist who pointed out that when the autopsy came back and said that the baby had air in its lungs and in its stomach, and it was likely that the baby drew breath before, and the medical examiner's finding was that the baby was suffocated in a plastic bag. The forensic pathologist that I saw interviewed recently pointed out that if they had attempted to resuscitate the baby, which they did, that it was possible that the air in the lungs and the stomach could have come from that, and it is not indicative that that the baby ever breathed. It was also interesting because in addition to the morphine and caffeine in the birth mother's in the baby that would have come from the birth mother, there was also phentermine in the mother, which is a well-known diet drug. So it's kind of interesting. There are some videos out that you can find on YouTube if you search for Alexi Trevino, Treviso, 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 that show her a couple, 2 or 3 weeks before this incident at a pep rally with her cheer squad. And it shows a very obvious baby bump under her cheer uniform. She had told people she was gaining weight, so it makes one wonder, did she really not know that she was pregnant? Or was she attempting to lose weight so that her baby bump wouldn't be that obvious? It is really interesting and really, somebody in the chat was just asking me to talk about Dior coons, which I will do. It's an interesting question. It is going to be a very interesting fact question should this case go to trial, whether or not she knew she was pregnant. Some of her high school acquaintances now say, yes, she knew. She was talking about baby names. So I think it's too early to figure this one out, but it's going to be very interesting to keep an eye on. Somebody just asked if I would talk about Dior Coons. Dior Coons is a little boy who disappeared on a day camping trip with his family. His body has never been found. His parents have been and family have been somewhat suspicious, have had a lot of conflicting answers to questions, and some of the family members were not necessarily his parents, but some of the family members that were with him were suspect in whether or not they were trustworthy. I did do a live about this. We did a live all about child disappearances, missing children. And Michelle may be able to track that down and put it in our show notes to tell you which episode that is. Finally, I want to talk about Rudy Farias. Rudy Farias is a young man who has been missing since he was, who had been reported missing, let's put it this way, at age 17, and his mother reported him missing, and he was never really missing. She convinced him. He appears to be a young man who may be of somewhat diminished capacity. He his mother claimed that he was missing. She convinced him that if he surfaced and the police found him, that they would arrest him and that he would go to jail. So it's kind of a confusing and a little bit unclear, the story. The mother was concerned that she felt they were accusing her, and she invited a man who is a community organizer and a community advocate, especially a community advocate for young people. He's well known in their community. I blanked on his name right now. You can see if you search Rudy Farias's the on YouTube, you will see those interviews. He was interviewed and he made some pretty stunning, some very stunning claims. He claimed that Rudy had told him that he had never been missing, that his mother had told him that he had to be missing, and she changed his name, and she was physically and sexually abusing him. The discussion the gentleman has in his interview is a lot more detailed than I care to get in this forum, but it's very unfortunate. Then the police came out and said none of that's true. He didn't say any of those things in his interview, but it's very strange. The mother was claiming that he was nonverbal. The minute the mother stepped out of the room, he was talking up a blue streak. So something is very strange in that case, and it will be interesting to follow and to see what else develops. So I guess we're at the point where I'll take a few questions. Like I say, I'm going to wrap up probably another 10 minutes or so and go take care of some family business. And so let's have some questions. Have I heard about Brandon Labiner? I have not. So that's an interesting one. If you would like me to look into it, I will. I make notes every week when y'all give me new cases that you want to have me talk about. So Brandon Labiner. And congratulations, Jacqueline Dodson, on becoming a grandma today. I'm envious. Yes, I'm a little jealous. I'm waiting my turn, but I keep having everybody tell me there's nothing better than being a Grammy. So welcome, baby Cleo. And I'm so pleased for you. So congratulations. Hi, Don Schaefer. I'm feeling really good. For those of you who didn't catch the intro, today is 3 weeks since I had total hip replacement on my right hip. My physical therapist tells me I'm a rock star and that I'm making really good progress, and he's seeing good progress, and also I'm kind of a little ahead of schedule. So that's all good. I'm here to tell you, though, I still get tired in the evenings. My body's still catching up. And so by the evenings, I'm still a little bit running out of steam, especially on days like today when I had physical therapy. But I'm doing really well. I was able to travel. I'm in Boise, and I was able to travel over to the Portland area, which is about 6 hours away, for a family reunion. And it was absolutely delightful. I was thrilled I was able to go and came back. Now I'm here to tell you, I was kind of whooped the next day, but I'm doing really well. I expect a few more Wednesdays, and I'm going to be back to where I was before the surgery. So thanks for asking. It's so nice that you all care and, think about me enough to ask. So thanks. Trisha the Trucker, you're in Richmond, Virginia. Can I talk for a minute about the Chad guy from Ohio who murdered his 3 young sons? Anything new on that one? As far as I know, there is not. His last name is Dorman, Doerman, I think. He was arraigned on the initial charges, and it seems to me that they are waiting for a grand jury. Every jurisdiction does things a little bit differently, but so some present to a grand jury. Obviously, he was arrested. They filed charges, the initial charges, in order to hold him. The court set security, and now they will go back and actually complete the full indictment. So that takes a little while, and it also takes a while if they're going to present to the grand jury. So I expect we're probably going to see something maybe next week as far as the indictment on to the grand jury on the arraignment on the indictment. So it's a very sad story and absolutely mystifying. If you watch the body cam of him being taken into custody, he is absolutely calm. He says, "I'm not on drugs. I won't hurt anybody. I don't mean anybody any harm. I'm not mentally ill," and they take him into custody. And it is shocking. So I think that is a case we're going to need to know a lot more about to sort of tease out what the heck was going on there. So, but I'm on that one. I will be. Hi, Maxine. Will you be attending Chad Daybell's trial? I don't know yet. It really sort of depends on where my book's at. I've promised my publisher an initial manuscript, so at least the first draft by the end of the year. Then it's really going to be up to my publisher whether they want to charge forward with getting the book out, or whether they want to do revisions as Chad's trial becomes available. I expect, because they've been waiting a while, that they'll want to move forward. So with that said, I don't know whether it will be helpful at that point for me to attend Chad's trial or not. I'm going to do my best to attend Lori's sentencing. We'll see how that goes, whether or not the judge actually will let me in, but I'm going to try. And I think I'll have a better idea a little later in the year. The book is scheduled to go into pre-sale and pre-release in May, in time for CrimeCon in May. CrimeCon is going to be on the West Coast this year in May. So the book is going to be, pre-sales are going to be available before then. And the book should be on the shelf September 2024. Chili me. Oh, silly. Sorry. Silly me. Has there been any news about Chad Daybell's plea bargain? Not yet, and this does not surprise me, because I don't think we're going to hear anything until after Lori's sentencing. Once Lori is sentenced and Chad knows what Lori's sentence is going to be, then I think that's when they're going to start bargaining, because I think he's going to be hoping to have whatever her sentence is, the same sentence for him. So if she gets life without the possibility of parole, then I don't know. He may roll the dice and go and decide to go on to trial. If, on the other hand, she gets some sort of potential for parole, say in 25 years, that might be enough for him to say, yeah, I'll take that deal too. So it'll be, I don't think we're going to hear anything until after her sentencing. And then I think fairly quickly after her sentencing, we'll hear something if it's going to happen. Good questions, guys. Deborah Dutra. Next week, tell us one of your stories. I really enjoyed the ones from last week. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed the one from last week. You know, sometimes it's a little hard to tell stories if they involve my actual clients, because that means that I have to be very cautious about attorney-client privilege, because attorney-client privilege doesn't end when the trial ends, when the sentence happens, or when the lawyer retires. So I still need to make sure that I am not that I'm not betraying any attorney-client privilege of any kind, and so I have to be cautious about that. What made it simple in Kaylee Sawyer's case was that I was not involved in that case. But I did know so many of the people that were involved, including Edwin Lara's wife, Isabel. So it made it as close to being one that I was on without actually being there. So, but I'll try and think of some other ones that we can share. Pam White Hasbrook. This is an interesting question. Thoughts on the Leslie Van Houten release from Manson murders? Wow. I have a lot of thoughts about it. I think that we often have to ask ourselves what the purpose of incarceration is. Is it to rehabilitate people, or is it to punish, or is it to keep that person out of society? And those are three reasonable reasons for incarceration, and we debate those. What is more important, what takes precedent, all the time. Our legislatures debate that, about what emphasis to put on restitution and redemption, as opposed to punishment and keeping that person out of society. And I think that there has to be a balancing act. Leslie Van Houten was young, impressionable, and heavily using drugs at the time, because Manson was handing out drugs like they were bubble gum. Everybody was using drugs, and a lot of them. So we have to think about that. We also have to look at the fact that they committed two heinous acts of barbarism. They murdered the LaBianca family, his husband and wife, and then, of course, went to Sharon Tate's home and murdered everyone there. So I think, we're looking at really awful, heinous crimes. We're looking at there being so little motivation. They were motivated simply by Charles Manson told them that if they committed these crimes and told everyone that African American people had done them, that he would somehow be able to spark a race war. If you have never read Vince Bugliosi's book about the case, it is so sobering. It's called Helter Skelter. It is it's one of those things that when I read it, I couldn't put it down, and I read it in 3 days, and I stayed up all night reading it because it was so riveting. So we have to we have to kind of balance those things. Leslie Van Houten has been incarcerated for almost all of her natural life. I want to say her conviction was in 69 or 70, and she has been incarcerated ever since. So uh, that's no excuse. I mean, she certainly has been incarcerated a long time. There are certainly people who have committed murder who have been released in less time. Um, so she's an old woman. Uh, I I think that it is humane. I think the parole board felt that it was the humane thing to do to allow for her release. She will be on a very short leave. She will be heavily supervised on release, on parole. And to be honest, I don't know at what point she stopped being a threat to the public, but I would say that it was probably many years ago. Um, while I don't condone in any way what they did, and I don't excuse, I don't think their youth or their use of hallucinogenics and other um, deeply personality changing drugs. I do think that after all of this time, that perhaps it was the right thing to do and the humane thing to do. And I know I'm a little bit of a liberal defense attorney and I see all the sides of it. So I'm a Libra. What can you say? Um, and you know, people can differ about it. Intelligent minds can differ, and I respect that there are other people who may feel that she should have died in prison, and I'm okay with that. I mean, I'm okay with people who feel that she should have died in prison. It was within the decision of the parole board at the time that she was sentenced. They were California had indeterminate sentencing, and it was up to the discretion of the judge to allow for some period of parole, for release on parole after some period. So, yeah, I mean, it's a tough one, and I certainly understand that if there are people who disagree. Reasonable minds can differ. I think that is Tennessee Girl 79. Is there a minimum sentence Lori will get? If already answered, I apologize. I was late. Nope, it has not already been answered. My understanding is that the minimum sentence that she could get would be life in prison with the opportunity to apply for parole after 12 years. Do I think she's going to get that? I don't. But that would be the lowest possible sentence. Now, it's interesting because Arizona, if y'all want to really dive deep into the difference between determinate and indeterminate sentencing, I did a newsletter about it that really gets down in the weeds. So look for that on the website if you're interested in getting more in depth about this. But back in the mid 80s to late 80s, a lot of states, there was you know how the pendulum swings. Well, at that point, there were a lot of conservative politicians who were demanding more accountability, particularly for violent crimes. So there were a number of states who adopted in some way minimum sentencing standards for certain crimes. Now, in my home state of Oregon, it was a state referendum. It's called Ballot Measure 11, and it listed the crimes for which there had to be a mandatory sentence. Now, what that means in Oregon is if a person is convicted of the crime, they do the mandated time, and the judge has no discretion to say, I'm going to lessen the sentence. That is called determinate sentencing. That means in Oregon, there is a sentencing matrix. It's very complicated. Lawyers take classes to figure out how to understand the sentencing matrix in Oregon. And in states where there is determinate sentencing, that's the case. They're pretty complicated. Now in Idaho has indeterminate sentencing. So their sentences, you get a maximum sentence, and then you get a period of time before potentially a judge could allow parole. So it's a very different, because the judge has discretion in Idaho to determine what that length of parole will be. Where in Oregon, that's not the case. Your sentence is served straight time. For example, an armed robbery, you get 7 years. You get no time off for good time. You get no availability to engage in jail programs that could get you early release, like drug and alcohol treatment, or some of the other treatment programs that prisons have that allow you early release if you complete them. So there's none of that. You serve that day for day. You don't get any good time. You don't get time off for your good behavior. You don't get furloughed if you complete a program. You get none of that kind of rehabilitative programming. And at the end of your sentence, you have a prescribed parole. So the length of parole is not discretionary with the judge. Judge can't decide, oh, you seem like a nice guy and it wasn't that bad, so I'm not going to give you 7 years, I'm going to give you 5. Can't happen in Oregon. So sentences are set by the legislature. And that is that way in Arizona as well. So in Arizona, while Lori's charges of conspiracy to commit murder are not death penalty eligible, they are life with the possibility of parole after 25 years. So, and that is a mandatory sentence. So even if for some reason she were to get a lighter sentence in Idaho, she still has to stand trial in Arizona. And Arizona, if she's convicted, they don't have any choice. Arizona must, the judge in the Arizona case must impose a life sentence with the opportunity for parole after 25 years. So here, what we know so far is that the minimum sentence could be life in prison with the possibility of parole after 12 years. Now, that doesn't mean she'd get parole after 12 years. It only means she would have the right to apply for it. But I don't think the judge is going to do that. That if he doesn't give her life without the possibility of parole, I think the minimum time he would give her would be 25 years. So it mirrors the Arizona charge. But stranger things have happened with Judge Boyce. So we'll see. Excellent. Kathy Castro, thank you, good Lori, for taking a stand in support of maintaining a semblance of sanity in the true crime community. I stand with you. Profiting off the pain and suffering of others is not a good look. No, it's not. I've taken a fair amount of flack because I absolutely intend to sell my book and to profit from it. I also will tell you that I have hundreds of hours of research and study in this case, and that my book is about far more than just Lori and Chad. So I think, I think that the other piece of it is that we need as creators to be ethical and transparent about what we're doing. I don't know. I intend to, and I'm hoping very much that my book is very successful, because I am hoping very much to be able to give back to the true crime victims. And but I also feel that we are in that place where it's important for us to try and understand so that these things don't happen again. And the only way we do that is by people like me sitting down and combing through it all and trying to find the thread of the story and trying to find a way to understand something that for most of us is incomprehensible. So that's what I hope my book is going to do. I hope it's going to be very successful, because I would like to be able to give back to those victim communities. I have some ideas, and I'll be sharing those with you as we go along. To date, I've been very clear that while I appeared as a guest on several different creators' sites, I did not ever take money for appearing on those sites. And as you all know, those of you who were generous enough to send us a super chat, all of those super chats, including yours, Nirmala, go directly to our moderator, Kamala. Go directly to our moderator, Michelle, who does a terrific job. Kamala, I'm going to try and remember that because it's a beautiful name. I share your view, Lori. I too think it's the humane thing to do, even though I do understand arguments against a release. And you happen to be a Libra too. We tend to, sort of weigh that and try and balance things. That's just our nature, I think. So I do appreciate all of your support. I have tried to be as transparent as possible about where money goes. I do collect a small amount of money off of the ads. We have 8,000 subscribers. So the more subscribers we have, the more ad revenue is generated. So I get a little bit off the ad revenue that's generated. Sorry for all the ads and the replays. And that goes to buy a new microphone and a light ring that I can actually adjust. So please understand that we are all just, I love this quote. It is not original. As we're getting through this life, please understand that we're all just walking each other home. And let's stay together and stay kind and stay above the fray as we go forward. I want to thank everybody tonight for joining us. I'm going to end a little early so I can take care of a little family business. And I want to thank everyone who joined us. Thanks all of you who blessed Michelle with a donation. I appreciate it more than you could know. And I'm hoping that you will join us again next Wednesday. I seem to have more energy every week, so hopefully next Wednesday will be no different. Please, if you've enjoyed this video, please drop me a comment below. If there is a case that you would like me to look into or cover, drop me a comment below. And please let us know what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, so we can do it better. So I'm going to say good night. Thank you so much for joining. If I didn't get to your question, please drop it in the comments or email me. My email's in the comments below, because I do answer those emails when I get questions. I haven't been as prompt about it recently, but we're getting better. So I'm going to say good night. Thanks to you for all for joining us and for being here, all 400 plus of you being here every week to support us and to share in this community. So good night, y'all.